This video presentation will be based on the novel Antigone by Anouilh and how the dramatist conveys the overarching message through language, characterization, structure, and imagery. The first thing that will be discussed in this presentation is the overarching message. Now, there will be a developmental process of achieving this message. There will first be a mentioning of a possible interpretation that could have been given by Anouilh, and then another interpretation that could have been made by the reader. This will be followed by a characteristical analysis of Antigone, for she will be characterized as a tragic hero. This will be then followed by language and how diction creates atmosphere and tone. Structure will come next, containing dialogue and grouping and the significance of this, and then nature and childhood imagery will also be discussed. The video presentation will conclude with a visual representation and a song which will relate back to the play. A possible central interpretation or message that Jean Anouilh would have wanted to be carried out throughout the play is that Antigone is a tragic hero who refuses to compromise her spiritual and moral beliefs for the greater good. Now, this interpretation was generalized and it was interpreted as Antigone being a symbol of a modern hero, whether famous or obscure. We chose to characterize Antigone as the tragic hero because she seems to have the certain elements of a tragic hero. The first one being that she's of nobility because she is the daughter of Oedipus and her uncle Creon is the current king of Thebes. Antigone also has a tragic flaw, being one of hubris, which is excessive pride. And although it may not be apparent at first, it will be later explained in the language portion of this video. The next element of a tragic hero that Antigone seems to conform to is to have an unhappy ending. And this is quite obvious because Antigone does die at the end of the play. Another common element of a tragic hero is that the character must be worthy of concern or interest. And what sparks the interest in Antigone is that there's such a contrast between her pure and innocent self and the rash and brave decisions that she makes, which ultimately define her fate. Furthermore, the character of Antigone can be interpreted as an unconventional character or an atypical tragic hero, for she is not a man, and commonly tragic heroes are portrayed as men. Next, the suffering that the tragic hero goes through must have a greater meaning, and it is evident that the actions that Antigone took had meaning to her and affected those around her. But since Creon did not seem to be much affected by it, it is unlikely that the people of Thebes would have reacted to the events that just took place. Another piece of evidence that supports the idea that Antigone is a tragic hero that does not compromise her spiritual moral beliefs is that she's doomed from the beginning, and she does take responsibility of this. She understands that she'll have to be put to death if she was to go and bury Polynices. Moreover, the downfall that the character of Antigone experiences is a free choice, and the root of the downfall was acknowledged because Antigone understands that she must be put to death because she buried Polynices. The suffering that Antigone endured and the journey she decided to take, which ultimately led to her death, characterizes her as a tragic hero who refuses to compromise her moral or spiritual beliefs in order to achieve a greater good. And this relates back to our central interpretation because it classifies her as a hero as a result of the actions that she took. The diction of this play gives a further analysis of Antigone being a hero, for it reestablishes the fact that she is a character of concern. Diction also sets the atmosphere and the tone of the play. The diction enables the reader to understand that Antigone is a character worthy of concern and interest, for she masks her fear by acting courageous and brave. This emphasizes the fact that her character is a strong character, for she not only has a sense of responsibility, but also of obligation to go bury her brother Polynices, even though she may be afraid, for it is the right thing to do. Antigone is further established as a character worthy of concern, for the reader pities her, for she is portrayed afraid, as mentioned before. The diction that she uses during her dialogue are words such as fear of dying, blood, pain, afraid, safe, and this creates a visual image of a feeble young woman who is essentially afraid of death. Moreover, Antigone's love of life is portrayed throughout the novel, and this is ironic, for she chose death, and this allows the reader to sympathize. Next, the chorus sets the tone by creating sympathy for the characters, particularly Antigone. The tone and diction that Antigone uses throughout her dialogue during her argument with Creon supports the idea that she is characterized as a tragic hero, for it shows that she is proud. Antigone often responds with short, abrupt phrases that carry a very matter-of-fact and arrogant manner, and it perhaps shows that she is innocently proud. Similar to the diction and the tone that is being used in the play, the atmosphere also supports the idea that Antigone is a hero that refuses to compromise her spiritual and moral beliefs, even it may result to be fatal for her. The atmosphere is tragic and at times heavy with despair, since there is so much death in the play. Pages 30 to 37 contain part of an argument between Antigone and Creon, and the dialogue here is generally in the form of Creon making a huge speech and Antigone responding with a short, matter-of-fact answer. This shows Antigone's pride, which contributes to her being a tragic hero, as pride, or hubris, is her tragic flaw. The structural grouping of the play also contributes to Antigone being a tragic hero, for it portrays her as an unconventional hero. And in correlation with this, Jean Anouilh perhaps writes his play using unconventional structure, for there are no definite groupings, scenes, or acts. Rather, it's just one long piece of writing. The short play perhaps symbolizes Antigone's short life. Jean Anouilh also uses childhood imagery to support the idea that Antigone is a tragic hero. The imagery creates a picture of Antigone being an idealist, and this correlates with the fact that she will not accept to compromise her spiritual and moral beliefs. Childhood imagery also emphasizes Antigone's purity and idealism and aids in making Antigone's character a character of concern. It is always the innocent, pure, and feeble princess that steals the sympathy of the reader. The following slides contain evidence where childhood imagery is being used. The next type of imagery that will be discussed is nature imagery. This type of imagery also establishes Antigone as a character of concern or interest, for she is portrayed as innocent. The purity of Antigone's childish idealism is compared to the garden of the early morning. A piece of evidence where nature imagery is used can be found on page 6. This painting was most likely done by a Scandinavian artist during medieval times. However, as all websites referring to this image were all written in an unknown language, its origin is unknown. Now, how does this relate back to Antigone? The skull represents death, specifically Antigone's death, as she is wearing a crown made of a golden strand of wheat. This is a reference both to the fact that Antigone is royal and to the numerous allusions to nature imagery that can be found throughout the text. Next, the flowers represent how Antigone lost her life while she was still young. She was still at the beginning of her bloom. Flowers are also an emblem for purity, which Antigone is being constantly portrayed as. This imagery also relates to the nature imagery that's found throughout the book. The hourglass symbolizes time passing, running, as Antigone's life is short-lived. Finally, the butterflies, which are beautiful, delicate creatures that flit around above the worldly agitation, are similar to Antigone's refusal to be held down by responsibilities towards happiness and life.